She won't understand. She's never had money." Those words weren't whispered. They were tossed, light as air, across the cafe like crumbs to pigeons. And when the laughter followed, sharp, polite, rehearsed, something inside me cracked so quietly that no one but me could hear it. That betrayal lit a fire in me I never thought I had. My name is Lois Bennett, and before I go any further, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. I always find comfort in knowing stories like mine reach hearts all over the world, because what I'm about to tell you, it's about more than pride or money. It's about respect and what happens when the people you love forget who you really are. That afternoon, I had stopped by the cafe on Maple Street, the new one my daughter-in-law, Tina, loved to frequent. It was one of those trendy places with glass walls and white furniture that made you feel like you should whisper when you ordered. I went there to bring her a small bouquet of lilies, her favorite, as a gesture of goodwill. Things had been tense between us lately, and I thought maybe, just maybe, a kind gesture might thaw the ice. But before I could approach her table, I heard my own name, followed by that sentence that would echo in my mind for weeks. Lois just doesn't get it. She's never had money. She thinks saving coupons is smart, bless her heart. The women around her, all manicured nails, glossy hair, and identical laughs, joined in. "Didn't she used to be a teacher?" one of them asked, with that cruel curiosity people disguise as conversation. "Yes," Tina said, smirking, "and now she lectures me about budgets. She actually thinks my husband and I should stop using the credit card for travel. Can you imagine?" They all laughed again, and I just stood there a few tables away, bouquet in hand, invisible. For a moment, I couldn't move. I wanted to march right up, look her in the eye, and remind her who helped her and my son with their down payment, who cooked their meals for weeks after their wedding when they were too tired to stand. But something held me back. Not fear, not weakness, but a deep, hollow ache that whispered, "They don't see you anymore, Lois." I slowly turned and walked out. The lilies trembled in my hand. I left them on the cafe bench outside their scent, too gentle for the bitterness blooming inside me. On the bus ride home, I watched my reflection in the window, my silver hair pulled neatly back, my worn cardigan buttoned all the way up. To the world, I looked like any old woman heading home after errands, but inside my mind was loud, replaying every word, every laugh, every humiliation I'd swallowed in silence. Tina had been like this for a while, quick to judge, quicker to dismiss. When she first married my son, Michael, she seemed sweet, nervous even. But as the years went by, the sweetness curdled into something sharper. She started deciding where holidays were spent, what furniture didn't fit the aesthetic, and who belonged in her version of family gatherings. And Michael, my only child, he just smiled and said, "Mom, it's easier if we let her handle things." So I let her handle things. I let her handle my house when she insisted we renovate it to raise the value. I let her handle my role in family dinners, my voice in decisions, even the space I occupied at my own table. I told myself it was temporary, that it was easier this way. But humiliation has a way of waking something old and strong inside you, a part that remembers who you were before life made you small. That evening, I sat in my quiet kitchen, the clock ticking softly against the hum of the refrigerator. I made myself a cup of tea and stared at the chipped rim of my favorite mug, the one my husband had bought me on our trip to Maine years ago. He used to say, "Lois, you don't need to raise your voice to be strong. You just need to know when to speak." That night, for the first time in a long while, I knew I would speak again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I would. Because some lessons, even about money, are best taught by those who've earned their worth the hard way. When my husband died, the silence in the house became unbearable. The sound of the kettle boiling, the creak of the floorboards, they all echoed too loudly. So when Michael insisted I move in with him and Tina, for a while I thought maybe it would help. I packed my life into 5 boxes, photo albums, his old fishing hat, my cookbooks, and tried to believe it was a new beginning. At first, it felt almost comforting. The house was bright and new, with white walls and modern art that never seemed to rest anywhere naturally. But soon, I realized it wasn't home. It was Tina's kingdom, and I was only a tolerated guest. She started small. "Lois, maybe we should move your rocking chair to the basement. It doesn't really go with the decor." Or, "Oh, I replaced your curtains with linen ones. These look cleaner." One day, I came home from the grocery store and found the hallway family photos rearranged. My wedding picture, the one of me and my late husband laughing in front of the lake, was gone. When I asked, Tina smiled sweetly and said, "It didn't fit the new color scheme, Mom." I wanted to say something, but Michael came in, tired from work, and I swallowed my words. He looked at me and said softly, "Mom, she just wants things tidy. Don't take it personally." But I did. How could I not? Every inch of that house carried her perfume, her taste, her voice. I became a ghost living among things that used to have meaning. The kitchen was the hardest part. I'd always loved cooking. It was how I showed love. But Tina didn't like my heavy recipes. She'd wrinkle her nose and say, "Oh, Lois, that's too much butter. We're watching our cholesterol." Then she'd order takeout. The only time she wanted my help was when her friends came over. I'd make my pecan pies, and she'd claim it was our family recipe. Once, she even told her guests she taught me how to make crust from scratch. I laughed, then a tight, quiet laugh, because sometimes silence is the only shield left. But silence doesn't stop pain from growing roots. One afternoon, as I was watering the plants near the living room window, I overheard Tina on the phone. She was laughing softly, that sugar-sweet tone she used when she was pretending to care. "Yes, once we get the old house sold, we'll finally have enough for the beach property. No, Lois doesn't know yet. It's complicated." My hand froze midair. The plant water spilled over the pot and onto the carpet. The old house? That was the home I'd shared with my husband, the one Michael had convinced me to let them manage a year earlier when my knees got bad. He said it would be easier if they handled the taxes and repairs. I'd signed the papers because I trusted them. That night at dinner, I tried to keep my hands steady as I passed the mashed potatoes. "Tina," I said lightly, "I overheard you talking about the old house. Are you thinking of selling it?" Her fork clinked against her plate. "Oh, that? It's just an idea Michael had. We're exploring options." I looked at my son, but he didn't meet my eyes. "It's all in your best interest, Mom," he said. "My best interest," I repeated, forcing a smile. "I suppose I'll have to see what that looks like on paper." They both went quiet. Tina's jaw tightened. I realized then that I wasn't part of this family anymore. I was an inconvenience, a signature, a key to something they wanted. That night, I sat in the guest room, my temporary stay that had stretched into years. I ran my hand along the arm of my husband's rocking chair and whispered, "They're selling our life, George, piece by piece." And in that quiet, a thought began to take shape, not bitter, not vengeful, just awake. If they were planning something behind my back, I would find out. Because the one thing they seemed to forget about me was that I may be old, but I wasn't foolish. I found some papers about the Elm Street property. He froze. His thumb stopped mid-swipe on the phone screen. "Mom," he sighed, "you shouldn't go through things that don't concern you." "Don't concern me?" I repeated. "It's my name on the papers, Michael. My husband's name. Everything we built together. Tell me what this is." Tina jumped in, her tone quick and defensive. "It's just restructuring, Lois. We're trying to consolidate assets under one management account. It's standard practice." I stared at her. "Standard practice," I said quietly. "For taking something that isn't yours?" Her eyes narrowed. "We're family. You make it sound like we're stealing." "Maybe that's because it feels like you are," I said, my voice trembling not from fear but from control. Michael rubbed his forehead. "Mom, please don't make this dramatic. You're overreacting. We're just managing things better. We can't keep property in your name forever. You're getting older." That word older landed like a slap. I pushed back my chair and stood. You're right, Michael. I am getting older, but don't mistake that for blind. I turned and walked out before the tears came. I went straight to my room, shut the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The papers were still in my hand, slightly crumpled now. I thought of my husband again, of how careful he'd always been with finances, how he used to make me read every document twice. Never sign what you don't understand, Lois. Paper can smile at you and still lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake watching the light from the street lamp spill through the curtains and made a decision. Tomorrow, I would go to the bank myself. I needed to see where I really stood on paper and in toi. Because if they were bold enough to hide this from me, I needed to be brave enough to uncover everything. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still, the kind of stillness that follows tension, quiet but heavy. I dressed carefully, gray slacks, a cream blouse, and my late husband's navy cardigan, the one that still faintly smelled like cedar and aftershave. I told myself I was just going to inquire, nothing more, but deep down, I knew this was the day everything would change. The First State Bank of Millwood sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, its glass doors gleaming in the early light. I hadn't been there in years, not since George and I opened our savings account together. My hands trembled slightly as I pushed through the doors, the air-conditioned chill biting my skin. At the counter, a young woman greeted me with a polished smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" "I'd like to inquire about some accounts and property records under the name Lois Bennett," I said, my voice calm but deliberate. "My husband, George Parker, passed some years ago, and I believe I need to review what's still active." She nodded politely, clicking through her computer. "Do you have an account number, Mrs. Parker?" "I'm afraid I don't," I said, "but I have identification." I slid my ID across the counter, feeling oddly exposed, like I was laying down a piece of my soul. The young woman frowned at her screen, then looked back at me, her tone changing slightly. "Just a moment, ma'am. I'll need to call someone from management." My stomach twisted. "Is there a problem?" "Oh, no, not at all," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "It's just, your name is attached to several high-level records. I'll have our director assist you personally." A few minutes later, a tall man in a navy suit walked out of an office near the back. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, and when his eyes met mine, something flickered recognition. "Mrs. Parker," he said, extending his hand warmly. "It's an honor to finally meet you." "Finally?" I repeated, bewildered. "Yes," he said, leading me into his office. "I'm David Graham, bank director. Your husband, George, was one of our most respected investors. You've been our silent shareholder for nearly 2 decades. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. Shareholder? He nodded, smiling gently. Yes, ma'am. You own 11% of this bank, actually one of our largest individual shares. George invested early, back when we were just a small local branch. I've always wanted to thank you both for the foundation you helped build. I sat back, my pulse thundering in my ears. There must be some mistake, I whispered. I was never told. Mr. Graham shook his head. No mistake. Your husband transferred the shares solely into your name before he passed. You've been receiving dividends automatically, deposited into a dormant trust account. It's all still there, untouched. My breath caught. I'd spent years believing I was barely scraping by clipping coupons, counting pennies all while my name had been quietly written across something powerful. He handed me a folder. Inside were neatly organized statements showing years of earnings, interest, and ownership confirmations. My husband's handwriting was there too, on the final notarized line. To my wife, Lois Bennett, the most reliable investment of my life. Sigh, Inai. Tears stung my eyes. I pressed my hand over my mouth, swallowing the lump in my throat. Ah, Mr. Graham's voice softened. You're a remarkable woman, Mrs. Parker. George must have trusted you deeply. If If you ever need assistance managing or expanding these assets, my door is always open." I nodded, still speechless. When I finally stepped back out into the sunlight, the air felt different, alive, electric. People hurried past me, unaware that the quiet old woman on the sidewalk had just rediscovered her worth, her power, and her husband's faith in her. I stood there for a moment, letting the morning breeze lift my hair. "They thought I'd lost everything," I murmured to myself. But I had more than they ever imagined because he never stopped believing in me. As I walked toward the bus stop, a calm certainty settled in my chest. This wasn't over. Not yet. They had humiliated me. They had underestimated me. But now I knew exactly who I was and what I had. And the next time they tried to make me feel small, I'd remind them gently, publicly, and unmistakably just who they were talking to. The Saturday after my visit to the bank, the air in the house felt different. Not because anything had changed physically. Tina still hummed through the kitchen, her bracelets clinking like wind chimes, and Michael still buried himself in emails, but because I had changed. There was a steadiness in me now, a quiet current of confidence that hummed beneath my skin, the kind of confidence that doesn't need to shout. Tina was hosting one of her ladies' teas that afternoon. These were her pride delicate cups, overpriced pastries, soft jazz, and a dozen women in pastel dresses gossiping about who'd bought what. She always asked me to keep to my room during them because, as she once said with a smile, "I don't want my guests feeling uncomfortable around older folks." But this time, I had no intention of hiding. By mid-afternoon, the house was filled with perfume and laughter, the kind of laughter that isn't joy, just noise, meant to fill the air with importance. I could hear the women complimenting each other's jewelry, comparing handbags, and discussing investments like children swapping marbles. I stood at my doorway for a long moment and straightened my blouse, clasped my pearl necklace, the one George gave me on our 25th anniversary, and walked toward the living room. The conversation faltered slightly when I appeared. Tina's smile froze, her voice tightening as she said, "Oh, Lois, I didn't know you were joining us." I smiled politely. "Well, dear, I live here too." There were polite chuckles, the kind that only makes silence louder. I could feel the guests' eyes flit over me, my modest clothes, my silver hair, my calm posture. One of them, a tall woman with diamond earrings that caught the light like little daggers, smiled thinly and said, "It's wonderful that you still like to mingle, Mrs. Parker. My mother just stays in her room all day." I met her gaze, my tone soft. Maybe she's just waiting for someone to invite her to sit. That earned a few nervous laughs. Tina's lips tightened. "Mother-in-law humor," she said quickly, waving it off. They resumed their chatter: real estate, stocks, handbags. I sipped my tea quietly, letting their words roll past me like waves. Then it happened again, that same tone, that same sting of dismissal. Tina was describing a new luxury development they were looking to invest in, and one of her friends asked if I understood any of it. Tina smirked, crossing her legs. "Oh, Lois won't get it. She's never had money to play with. She grew up saving coins in jars." Laughter again, too loud, too rehearsed. I didn't flinch this time. I set my teacup down gently on the saucer, letting the sound of porcelain against glass slice through their noise. And then, as if fate itself wanted its cue, the doorbell rang. Tina frowned. Who could that be? I rose before she could answer. "I'll get it." At the door stood Mr. Graham, the bank director, and his assistant, a young woman holding a portfolio. "Mrs. Parker," he greeted with his usual warmth. "Apologies for the intrusion. You'd asked us to deliver the annual shareholder summaries personally. I hope this isn't a bad time." I smiled. "Not at all. Please, come in." Tina's eyes widened. "Shareholder summaries?" Mr. Graham glanced toward her politely. "Ah, yes. Mrs. Parker is one of our major shareholders at First State Bank. We're updating her on our upcoming board meeting. She's been with us a very long time." The room went silent. The sound of the jazz stopped. Even the clock seemed to hesitate. One of Tina's friends whispered, "Major shareholder?" Tina's smile flickered, then froze. That must be some kind of misunderstanding. Mr. Graham looked mildly surprised. "Oh, no, ma'am. Mrs. Parker has one of our largest independent holdings. We're proud to have her among our key investors." The words landed like thunder in the quiet room. Every eye turned toward me, the woman they'd just laughed at, dismissed, patronized. I simply folded my hands and smiled faintly. "You were saying, dear?" Tina's face flushed crimson. She stammered something about tea getting cold, but her voice broke halfway through. And in that moment, surrounded by her polished friends and delicate china, I didn't feel angry or vindictive. I felt peaceful. Because true power doesn't roar. It arrives softly and lets everyone else feel the echo. The silence that followed could have frozen the air itself. You could hear the faint tick of the wall clock and the shallow breaths of women, too polite to speak, too stunned to look away. Mr. Graham handed me the folder thick with reports, numbers, and signatures as though nothing were unusual. "As we discussed, Mrs. Parker, the bank will continue honoring your late husband's original terms. We'll also move forward with the community scholarship fund you authorized. I must say, it's a generous contribution." I smiled softly. "Thank you, Mr. Graham. My husband always believed education was the only real inheritance worth giving." Tina's jaw dropped. "Scholarship fund?" she blurted. "Yes," Mr. Graham said kindly. "Mrs. Parker requested that a portion of her dividends be used to sponsor local students. She's helped dozens of young people in this town. I thought everyone knew." A soft gasp rippled through the room. I could almost feel Tina's composure slipping the mask she wore so carefully, cracking under the weight of reality. "Would you like us to schedule your meeting for next quarter's board review, ma'am?" Mr. Graham asked. "Yes," I said gently. "I think it's time I start attending in person again." He nodded, excused himself, and left with a courteous bow. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, sealing in a room full of red faces and wide eyes. I turned back toward the group. Every one of Tina's friends was staring at me as though they were seeing me for the first time. Maybe they were. I picked up my tea again, perfectly calm. "I do apologize for the interruption," I said. "Now what were we discussing?" "Oh, yes, money." A few of the women shifted uncomfortably, mumbling excuses about needing to check on something in their cars. One stood up and muttered, "It was lovely seeing you, Mrs. Parker." Within minutes, the room that had once buzzed with false laughter emptied, leaving only Tina and me. She stood there, rigid, her painted smile gone. You let me look like a fool," she hissed. I raised an eyebrow. "Did I? I don't recall saying anything cruel, dear. I simply answered the door." Her voice rose. "You should have told me. You made me—" "I made you nothing," I interrupted, softly but firmly. "You did that all on your own." She turned away, crossing her arms like a child cornered. "So what? You have money? That doesn't make you better." I looked at her for a long moment, my voice low and steady. "No, but it does mean you were wrong." Her head snapped toward me. "Wrong about who I am. Wrong about what matters. You thought money made you powerful, Tina, but all it did was make you small." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once, she had nothing to say. That night, after she'd stormed off to her room, Michael found me sitting on the porch. The sun had set and the cicadas hummed softly in the distance. He looked worn guilt in his eyes. "Mom," he said quietly, "I didn't know about the shares. I swear I didn't. I just wanted things peaceful." I studied his face. "My boy, now a man, but still afraid of confrontation. Peaceful," I repeated. "You mean easy." He swallowed hard. "Maybe." I sighed and reached for his hand. "Michael, peace built on silence isn't peace. It's surrender." He nodded slowly, tears glinting in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have protected you." I squeezed his hand. No, you just forgot who raised you, but I think now you remember. He nodded again, eyes downcast. Inside, I heard Tina's voice upstairs, sharp, angry, maybe even crying. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt release. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with shouting or punishment. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet realization that Tloe, once revealed, can't be buried again. I looked up at the stars, the same ones George and I used to count on the porch swing. You were right, my love, I whispered. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to wait for the right moment to speak. And for the first time in years, I felt whole again. A week passed after the tea incident, but the echoes of that afternoon lingered like perfume that refused to fade. Tina walked around the house in silence now, tight-lipped, careful, polite. She no longer corrected me when I spoke or rolled her eyes at my old-fashioned ways. It wasn't respect yet, not really. It was shock wearing the mask of manners. Michael, on the other hand, had changed in quieter ways. He started coming home early. He made coffee for me in the mornings, the way his father used to. He sat on the porch with me at sunset and talked, not about money or work, but about memories. About Dad, about how he wished he had paid more attention. There was guilt in his eyes, but also a kind of awakening. One evening, as the crickets sang and the air smelled faintly of rain, he said softly, "Mom, I don't know how to fix what happened." I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. You don't fix people, Michael. You grow beside them or you let them go. He nodded and we sat there in comfortable silence, the kind of silence I'd missed for years. A few days later, I packed my things. My knee had healed and I told them I was moving back into my own home. Tina offered a strained smile. Of course, Lois, whatever makes you comfortable. Her tone was polite, rehearsed, but beneath it, I could sense relief, like she couldn't wait to be free of the woman who'd silently upended her illusion of control. Michael helped me carry my boxes to the car. When we reached my little brick house on Elm Street, the one they had tried to sell, I felt tears sting my eyes. The ivy still climbed the walls, the wind chime still whispered by the porch, and my late husband's rocking chair waited in its rightful place. "Welcome home," Michael said, his voice breaking. Home, such a small word for something that feels like belonging. We unpacked quietly. I made us grilled cheese sandwiches and we ate at the kitchen table that still had a faint burn mark from when George once tried to fix a toaster himself. For the first time in years, I laughed freely. The sound surprised both of us. A month later, I returned to the bank for the board meeting. I sat at the long mahogany table surrounded by suits and spreadsheets and listened as they discussed future investments. When the meeting ended, one of the young executives leaned toward me and said, "Mrs. Parker, I have to say, you're sharper than most people half your age." I smiled. That's because I've had more time to learn when to listen and when to speak. On my way out, Mr. Graham stopped me. "I must say, Mrs. Parker, it's rare to see someone handle humiliation with such grace." I thought about Tina's words in the cafe, the laughter, the pity, and how I'd felt so small that day. Then I looked up at him and said quietly, "Grace isn't silence. It's remembering your worth when others forget it." He nodded, eyes warm with respect. These days, I live quietly again. I tend to my garden, volunteer at the local library, and visit the scholarship students once a month. Sometimes Michael and Tina visit too, together a little humbler now. She brings flowers. He brings patience. And though we don't speak about the past, it hangs between us like a lesson written in invisible ink. The anger is gone. What remains is understanding. I no longer see myself as the woman they once dismissed. I see myself as the woman who outgrew her silence. One evening, as I watched the sunset through my kitchen window, I whispered, "We did it, George." The golden light poured across the room, warm and forgiving, settling on the photo of us by the lake. His smile still made me feel seen. And in that quiet glow, I finally understood what wealth truly was. It wasn't money in the bank, or ownership, or the power to humble others. It was knowing that no one, not even those you love, can take your dignity unless you hand it to them. And I never will again.